I got home and found my whole family staring at my husband and my sister in an awkward silence. My dad stood up with a serious face and said, "Daughter, sit down. We need to talk." I smiled and replied, something that left them all in shock. He didn't offer me a seat. He pointed to the empty chair at the head of the heavy mahogany table like I was a junior associate being called in for a performance review. My husband, Jared, wouldn't even look at me. He was staring at his shoes, his hands shaking slightly in his lap. Next to him sat my sister, Caitlin, 7 months pregnant and smirking, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. My mother, Leslie, sat by the window, weeping silently into a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to perfection. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. This wasn't a family gathering. It was an ambush. George, my father, didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a thick legal document across the table toward me. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the silence. "We aren't asking for a divorce, Alice," he said, his voice cold and devoid of any fatherly warmth. "We are demanding you sign over your 51% stake in the company to protect the family assets." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Because Caitlin carries the air. And frankly, you are too emotional to lead." The doors to the library were closed. The heavy oak panel seemed to lean in, trapping me. I looked at the document, then at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me. They weren't family. They were a board of directors executing a hostile takeover. Before I tell you what I said next, tell me in the comments, what's the biggest betrayal you've ever experienced from your own blood? I'm reading every single one. They expected tears. They expected me to scream, to throw the heavy crystal tumbler my mother was nursing, to beg my husband to look me in the eye. They had prepared for an emotional explosion because that's what people do when their lives are being dismantled in front of them. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at the pen George had placed perfectly parallel to the signature line. It was a Mont Blanc. Heavy and black. The one he only used for signing million-dollar contracts. I picked it up. The weight of it felt familiar. For 10 years, as the CFO of this family's medical supply empire, I had used pens just like this to clean up their messes. I looked at Jared, my husband of 7 years, the man who had sworn to protect me, now cowering next to my pregnant sister. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was studying the pattern on the Persian rug like his life depended on it. "I've been weak lately, haven't I?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. George leaned back, a smug satisfaction settling into the lines of his face. He thought he had broken me. "We all have our limits, Alice. You've been under a lot of stress. It's affecting your judgment." "You're right," I continued, turning the pen in my fingers. "I've been so checked out these past 6 months. Just signing whatever you put in front of me. Like that check for Caitlin's new Porsche Cayenne. The one she needed for the baby's safety." Caitlin smirked, smoothing her dress over her bump. "It's a family car, Alice. You wouldn't understand." "And the transfers for Jared's business trips to Las Vegas?" I said, looking directly at my husband. $40,000 in a weekend. I signed off on that too. I didn't ask questions. I just wanted to keep the peace. "That's all in the past," George said, tapping the document impatiently. "Sign the transfer, Alice. Let us take the burden off your shoulders. Go to Seattle. Start over. We'll handle the company." I looked at them one last time. My mother, the enabler, my sister, the parasite, my husband, the traitor, and my father, the architect of my ruin. They looked at me and saw a defeated woman. They didn't see the shark they had created. I uncapped the pen. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the only sound in the room. I signed my name with a flourish, large and looping, just the way George liked it. I dated it. I initialed the rider clauses. Then, I capped the pen and slid the thick stack of papers back across the mahogany table. "Congratulations, Dad," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You won. You now own 100% of Henderson Medical Supplies. You own the inventory, the warehouses, and the brand." George snatched the papers, checking the signature like he expected it to disappear. Caitlin let out a little squeal of delight. Jared finally looked up, relief washing over his weak features. "You made the right choice," George said, tucking the documents into his jacket pocket. "We'll take care of you, Alice. We'll send you a stipend until you get on your feet." I smiled then. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a person watching a building collapse from a safe distance. "You don't need to send me anything," I said calmly. "And you might want to call the bank. Because along with the company, you also just acquired 100% of its liabilities." George frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection for the corporation at 8:59 this morning," I said, checking my watch. "It's been processed for 3 hours. The company isn't an asset, Dad. It's a corpse. The lines of credit are frozen. The accounts are locked. And since you just legally claimed full ownership, the creditors are going to be calling you, not me. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dead. It was the sound of all the oxygen being sucked out of the room. Caitlin's smirk vanished. Jared's face went gray. George stood up slowly, the blood draining from his face until he looked like a ghost. "You're lying," he whispered. "Check your email," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "I forwarded you the confirmation from the federal court. You wanted the crown, George? It's yours. I hope it's heavy." George didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He just stared at his phone, his face bathed in the pale blue light of the screen as the notifications rolled in, one after another. Ping. 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 The sound of his financial empire crumbling in real time. "Frozen," he muttered, swiping frantically. "Every account. The operating capital. The payroll. It's all locked." "That's how bankruptcy works, Dad," I said, slinging my purse over my shoulder. "It's a hard reset. You wanted control? You have it. Good luck explaining to the shareholders why their dividends just evaporated." I turned to leave. I had done what I came to do. I had dropped the match, and now I just wanted to walk away before the fire consumed the oxygen in the room. I reached for the heavy brass handle of the library door. I turned it. It didn't move. I frowned and twisted harder. Locked. Then I heard it. A deep, mechanical thud, echoing from inside the frame. It was the sound of a magnetic lock engaging the kind they install in high-security vaults, or in this case, the panic room my father had retrofitted into his library for security. My stomach dropped, but I forced my face to remain impassive. I turned back to the room. George wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was looking at me. And the look in his eyes wasn't fear. It was calculation. "You think I'm stupid, Alice?" he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You think I didn't have a contingency plan for your little rebellion?" "Unlock the door, George," I said, dropping the dad entirely. "You aren't well," he said, shaking his head with mock sadness. "That's the only explanation, isn't it? A sane daughter wouldn't destroy her family's legacy. A sane wife wouldn't bankrupt her husband. You're having a breakdown." He pressed a button on the intercom system on the table. "Send them in." The door to the adjoining kitchenette, the service entrance, swung open. 2 men walked in. They were wearing navy blue scrubs, but they weren't nurses. They were built like linebackers. Their necks thick with muscle. Their eyes dead and professional. One of them carried a small, zippered case. "Who are they?" Jared squeaked, finally finding his voice. "They're medical professionals," George lied smoothly. "Here to help Alice. She's clearly a danger to herself and others. Look at her. She's manic. Irrational." He turned to me, and the mask slipped completely. "I have Dr. Eris on speed dial. He's prepared to sign an emergency 72-hour hold. Involuntary commitment for a severe psychotic break induced by, let's say, the grief of your infertility. It's a tragedy, really." "You're going to lock me up?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "To get the company back? To get power of attorney," he corrected. "Once you're declared incompetent, I become your conservator. I can reverse the bankruptcy filing. I can annul the divorce. I can fix everything you broke." I looked at my mother. She was dabbing her eyes again, nodding along as if this were a reasonable solution to a difficult problem. I looked at Caitlin, who was watching with the detached interest of someone watching a reality show. And in that moment, I understood them perfectly. It wasn't just greed. It was something far more terrifying. They didn't see themselves as villains kidnapping a woman in her own home. They saw themselves as the victims. In their twisted reality, my refusal to serve them wasn't autonomy. It was a malfunction. To them, I was an appliance that had stopped working. You don't negotiate with a broken toaster. You fix it, or you force it to work. They had normalized their cruelty so thoroughly that stripping me of my civil rights felt like an act of love to them. "We have to save Alice from herself," they told themselves, "so she can go back to saving us." "This is kidnapping, George," I said, backing up until my legs hit the edge of the heavy desk. "It's an intervention," he said, stepping closer. "Sit down, Alice. Let the nice men give you something to calm your nerves. When you wake up, we'll have the papers ready for your signature. The real signature." The men in scrubs stepped forward. One of them unzipped the case. I saw the glint of a syringe. "Don't touch me," I warned, my hand slipping into my purse. Not for a weapon, but for the one thing that could save me. "Grab her," George ordered. The first man grabbed my left arm. His grip was professional, firm enough to bruise, controlled enough to control. The second moved to my right, flanking me like I was a violent criminal instead of a corporate officer in a pencil skirt. "Easy, ma'am," the one with the syringe said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Just a little pinch to help you sleep. As the cold alcohol wipe touched my skin, my mind didn't go to fear. It went to the ledger. The invisible balance sheet I had been keeping in my head for a decade. I remembered the winter of 2019. I was 26, the newly appointed CFO, working 80-hour weeks to save the company from an IRS audit my father had triggered with his creative accounting. I ate instant noodles for dinner every night for 3 months, because I was putting my entire salary back into the operating fund to make payroll. I lost 15 pounds. I lost my hair from the stress. At the same time, Caitlin was posting photos from her third gap year in Bali. She was staying in a 5-star resort, drinking champagne that cost more than my rent. All paid for by the company credit card I was desperately trying to pay off. They laughed at my frugality then. They called me boring and obsessed. They didn't know that while they were spending, I was documenting. Every noodle cup I ate was a line item in my resentment. Every luxury they enjoyed was a deposit in my bank of rage. And today, I was cashing out. Jared, I said, my voice cutting through the sterile air of the room. The man holding my left arm tightened his grip, but I didn't flinch. Look at me. My husband, the father of my sister's unborn child, finally raised his head. His eyes were wet with cowardly tears. I knew about the baby 3 months ago, I said. Caitlin gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. George froze, his hand hovering over the intercom. I knew about the affair 6 months ago, I continued, locking eyes with the man I had vowed to love. I saw the hotel charges on the Amex. The consulting fees you paid to Caitlin's shell company. I saw the diamond earrings you bought her for Valentine's Day, the ones she's wearing right now. Jared went white. Alice. I didn't say anything, I interrupted, my voice dropping to a lethal chill. I didn't scream. I didn't confront you. I let you do it. I let you steal. I let you dig the hole deeper and deeper every single day. Why? Caitlin whispered, looking at me like I was the monster. Because petty theft gets you fired, I said. But grand larceny? Embezzlement? That gets you prison. I looked at my father. You called me the smart one when you needed a tax loophole, Dad. But you called Caitlin the joy of the family. You thought my silence was submission. You thought my loyalty was infinite. I wrenched my arm. Not enough to break free, but enough to make the nurse stumble. I didn't stay these last 6 months because I was weak, I snarled, the mask of the dutiful daughter shattering completely. I didn't stay because I loved you. I stayed to get the receipts. I stayed to make sure that when I finally burned this house down, you would all be locked inside. Wait, I said. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. I went completely limp in the nurse's grip. The sudden lack of resistance threw them off. They loosened their hold just enough, expecting surrender. The needle hovered inches from my arm. A tiny bead of clear liquid trembling at the tip. Finally coming to your senses? George scoffed, reaching for the pen. Sign the power of attorney, Alice. Don't make them stick you. No, I said, locking eyes with him. My heart was hammering, but my voice was the voice of the CFO. Precise, analytical, lethal. I just want to ask you a question, Dad. As the CEO of this company for 30 years, do you know what the legal term, piercing the corporate veil, means? George blinked, thrown off by my calm. This isn't a game, I said. It's a legal doctrine. An LLC protects its owners only if the company is treated as separate. Once you use corporate money like personal cash, the veil is pierced, and the protection disappears. He scoffed, insisting that was why the LLC existed. I kept going. Caitlin's Porsche was bought directly from the operating account. I signed the check. Jared's $40,000 gambling debt was wired from corporate reserves. I authorized it. The house renovations, including this panic room, were all paid by Henderson Medical Supplies. I have the full paper trail. George's face drained of color. I didn't sign those checks because I was weak, I said. I signed them to prove the company is your alter ego. I helped you destroy your own liability shield. Caitlin panicked. What does that mean? It means creditors don't stop at the company, I replied. They come after you personally. This house. The Porsche. Jared's trust. I made you personally liable for $5 million. George staggered back. You'd lose too. I'm young, I said flatly. I'll recover. You won't. That's when he snapped. It doesn't matter what the law says if you can't testify, he hissed, ordering the men in scrubs to sedate me. The room shifted from legal warfare to violence as they pinned me to the table and raised the syringe. Just as the needle touched my skin, the estate gate exploded. Sirens screamed. Let go, I said calmly. Unless you want to add assault on a federal witness to your charges. I raised the silver brooch on my lapel. Agent Miller. Did you get that confession? George stared in disbelief. It's a wire, I said. You confessed to embezzlement and ordering my sedation on a live FBI feed. The doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room. My family was dismantled in minutes. 6 months later, the estate is seized, the gates chained, the lawn overgrown. George and Jared await trial. Caitlin lives in a motel, still blaming everyone else. I work in a small, sunlit office now. Less money, no locks, no fear. I deleted the ledger yesterday. Losing everything was the best deal I ever made. If you're the one holding a toxic family together, stop. See what collapses when you let go.